football, guys. Fantasy football show. It's the off season. We're having fun, and we're looking at stuff that has nothing to do, maybe a little bit to do with fantasy football. Dave, it's the new head coaches and the head coaching vacancies that are available. We're gonna take these. There are 7 head coaching vacancies right now, and we are going to rank them. Actually, one of them's already been taken. Mike Vrabel's already been hired by the New England Patriots, but we're going to include that in this list.
Who
and
saw that coming?
Nobody. No.
Oh my goodness.
The Patriots continue to be the first team to hire every single time. They were the first ones to hire Gerard Mayo last year. They were the first ones to hire Mike Vrabel this year, and they're doing it even earlier. It was like a week earlier than last year.
Sounds like they're bringing Josh McDaniels back to potentially be offensive coordinator too. I mean, the Patriots have their guys, and they really don't like leaving that bubble of comfort with the people that they know well.
Just absolute. I don't. Is
that being said, I do like the Vrabel hire quite a bit. I think that's.
I like Vrabel.
The following up Belichick is such a hard thing to do, and I feel like Gerard Mayo is almost in a position where he can't succeed. But I think Vrabel's a good coach. I'm a Bears fan. Anyone who watches the show is aware of that, and I kind of like the idea of bringing in Vrabel as the head coach. I think, and we're going to talk a lot about head coaching on the show. I think that's all we're going to talk about on this show. But I think the Lions really kind of laid out the blueprint. We're like, you don't need this strategist as your head coach. I think you need the rah-rah, get them all excited, bite the kneecaps, bury them in the dirt, all that sort of stuff. And then you can have your offensive coordinator kind of be the offensive mind, the genius that does all the X's and O's. And I think that's kind of what they're going for in New England now. Mike Vrabel, that's a lot of what he did in Tennessee, was just kind of be that leader. And I think that he can be that guy in Foxborough.
Yeah, honestly, I actually really like the Mike Vrabel head coaching pick there. I don't know what they're going to do at offensive coordinator. If they bring back Josh McDaniels, I think that'd be a mistake. We've seen him when he doesn't have Tom Brady, and it's not great. Especially Drake May, man. I don't want him to get ruined. And that scares me a little bit going forward.
I think McDaniel, though, is much better as an offensive coordinator than he is as a head coach. But again, it's so hard to judge anybody who played with Brady, or coached, I should say, for Brady, because Brady was clearly the guy. And we saw when he left, even Belichick, like all of his warts started to show as a head coach. I've never been a fan of Josh McDaniels as a coach. Obviously, again, you guys know I'm a Bears fan, and you know that I am a big Jay Cutler fan as well. There was an article written by Ted Sundquist a while back. He was the GM for the Denver Broncos when they drafted Jay Cutler. And it might be my favorite sports article ever written by Ted Sundquist. And it's titled something along the lines of Why We Drafted Jay Cutler and Where It All Went Wrong. And there's an amazing story in there that, Jay Cutler, like, he showed some promise early in his career, and then they hired Josh McDaniel. And the way they tell the story is that Jay Cutler and his agent walked into the initial meeting with Josh McDaniel, who basically just, did whatever he could to just rip into Jay Cutler. You suck. This is what you did wrong. This is where you need to improve. Pulled up film of his play and just ripped into him. And Jay Cutler left the meeting, looked at his agent, and said, "You got to get me out of Denver immediately." So I think Josh McDaniel is a smart guy when it comes to strategizing game plans and building out a playbook. I just don't think that he has that personal touch of how to properly deal with players.
I just kind of want to keep seeing the Patriots fail over and over and over. But with Drake May and Mike Vrabel there, it's actually looking up for them right now. And little spoilers. I think you guys are going to find out that the New England Patriots are in the top 2 for our rankings here. So we'll talk more about them as we go through this. But we're going to start from the bottom, work our way up through these 7 head coaching vacancies. And Dave and I are each going to give a prediction of who we think is going to end up being the head coach at this team. And guys, we have no true insider information. A lot of it is looking at Las Vegas betting lines and reports coming through from various insiders. But at the end of the day, none of that means anything. It's just who we think is going to end up there. Not even necessarily who we think is going to be the best coach. That'd be a little bit different. So, Dave, let's start off here at number 7. We both ranked the New Orleans Saints as the absolute worst destination for a head coach. I think a lot of it is just like they're in purgatory with their quarterback situation. They've got a lot of old players on the team, Alvin Kamara, guys that are just going to be costing them a ton of money. And on top of that, the cap situation is horrible. Like, they are basically in debt to the NFL. They're walking around looking like the United States government with how bad their cap situation is. Sorry, everybody. But I do not think this is a great spot for really any coach. And that's why for this one, I actually went with a young guy who's gotten a few opportunities for interviews, but he's always been the bridesmaid, never the bride. I'm going with Joe Brady here, the Bills offensive coordinator, getting a shot to be the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. He coached at LSU when Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow were there. He coached with the New Orleans Saints for a little while Drew Brees was there. He is very familiar with the organization, familiar with the surrounding area. And this is a young guy who, I've said this before on the podcast. It's actually kind of fun, everybody. He's my next door neighbor. So like I see him when he comes home for holidays and visits his parents, and great guy, great family. This is no intel. This is no real intel. I've not talked to him about this. I don't know anything. But my assumption here, it would be a young guy with familiarity with an organization looking to get that shot to be a head coach. The unfortunate thing is I feel like this is a no-win scenario for whoever gets this head coaching job. And whoever does get hired kind of feels like the patsy. They're just going to get blamed. And that's why I think it's more likely to be a young guy like this that's just hungry, looking for a shot. Dave, who do you think ends up being the head coach of the New Orleans Saints?
Well, first of all, I want to say I do think that Joe Brady would be the smart decision for them. He's a young, creative mind who I think he was kind of unfairly made the scapegoat in Carolina when he was let go there. I think that he was kind of the bright spot on that Carolina staff, but for whatever reason, he was the scapegoat. Now, he's kind of resuscitated his career with Josh Allen, and I think it would make a lot of sense to hire him. But if you look at the kind of guys that Mickey Loomis has hired over the year, he does like that kind of old school coach. And I don't
Yeah.
know. I think it was really smart of them to bring in Clint Kubiak, a guy who really helped their offense a little bit early in the season. But you look at the hires over the years, Dennis Allen, Sean Payton, those types of guys, and I can't help but feel like Steve Spagnuolo is just the Mickey Loomis type of hire. That old school leader of men. Get them all, just excited and playing hard. I think Joe Brady makes a
All
lot
the
more
old people
sense.
phrases. All the old people phrases, leader of men. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so Steve Spagnuolo is the guy that I kind of expect to end up in St. Louis. In the Saints. I don't know. Yesterday watching the game, I actually said the St. Louis Rams, and my wife was like, "What are you talking about?" I don't know where that came from, but yeah, I think Steve Spagnuolo probably makes the most sense for the Saints.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Older guy, like I wonder, maybe he just gives it one last ride. It's like the Fast and Furious. You think they're done, but then here comes another movie. Maybe Steve Spagnuolo is going to try to do that here with a head coaching gig. It just, maybe I'm thinking too much of like what I would do if I was him and I was in the situation he's been in, where you have such a great place to be. Let's just keep winning championships. Let's just keep getting paid instead of going somewhere where I'm going to be stressed out for my job over and over and over.
Where we are in
All right.
agreement, though, is that we both have this as the
Ugh,
worst possible location for a head coach.
absolutely awful. Absolutely awful. Sorry, Saints fans. Next on here, at number 6, New York Jets. The New York Jets, Dave, let me count the ways that there are so many things wrong with this. I've seen some other lists floating around. I think Colin Cowherd had the Jets at like number 4 on his list, or like number 3. Read some
Well, they
other
do have
articles.
a future Hall of Fame Super Bowl winning quarterback there, so
What could go wrong?
yeah.
What could go wrong? For me, I had to put this incredibly low, not just because of owner Woody Johnson and the turmoil and dysfunction that surrounds this. And we've talked about this before, that all of the bad things kind of, I'm not going to say the word, but the bleep rolls downhill in organizations like this. And when you have an owner that is making trade decisions based off of Madden ratings and just losing the relationships with the quarterback, with the coaches, and causing problems everywhere, that's already tough enough. But now you've got, maybe we're running with this a little too hard, but the Garrett Wilson tweet about him being like, yeah, Bryce Young has improved. Now the rumors are floating that he might want out of New York. And you've got Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers who want out of New York already. And it just doesn't seem like they've been able to patch the problems that they've had year over year over year. And even when they've had a good GM, or they've had a decent coach, or they've had a Hall of Fame quarterback, it just didn't matter. So I think they are going to take a play, from the book of the Detroit Lions, and just go with a guy that brings that rah-rah mentality, comes from a winning franchise right now, and has connections to the team. Aaron Glenn, he's the Lions defensive coordinator. He was drafted by the New York Jets years and years ago, spent a lot of time with that organization. I think the Jets just need to save face. And nothing saves face quite like bringing someone back home and bringing them over from a winning team.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. I've got Aaron Glenn as well as the guy. Although it wouldn't surprise me if they work out something with Rex Ryan. And I think that's just it. Like, right now fans are
Whatever your
unhappy.
salary is, plus a snack stipend every
Yeah.
game.
I think that they're going to do something to try to appease the fan base because the last 2 years expectations were really high with Aaron Rodgers, and we kind of saw how that went. And I don't expect Aaron Rodgers to return to the Jets, even despite a kind of nice finish to the end of the season. There, it sounds like he's ready to move on. The team is ready to move on from him. They're going to go into the next year with a new GM, new head coach, and probably a new Week 1 quarterback as well. So Aaron Glenn makes the most sense. That's a signing that would fire up the fan base. Like you said, a former player for the Jets, people would like him. But I think Rex Ryan still accomplishes that same thing. And even though the reports are that he didn't do well in his interview, it wouldn't surprise me if they're able to work something out. I'd say it's a toss up for me, trying to predict who their coach will be next year between
Yeah.
Aaron Glenn and Rex Ryan.
I just don't even know like what you do if you're the Jets because you've done the thing where you try to get the great quarterback. You've done the thing where you try to get the defensive coordinator from the really good team. You've done the thing in the past where you go and you get the brilliant offensive mind and none of it works. And that's where like I think you just get to the point where it doesn't quite matter who the candidate is if the owner remains the same. So sorry Jets fans, but like I don't have a lot of faith in that organization, particularly because of ownership, not because of the players or if Aaron Glenn becomes the coach there.
Which is funny because we'll get to the Bears eventually, and that's a huge thing. Like ownership
Yeah.
is terrible, and the difference is, a lot of times, like, with the Bears, for instance, there's a lot of good on paper with the roster, but the ownership is still the problem. And here we are knocking the Jets when we're going to be much higher on the Bears, but the reality is ownership plays a huge part in this. And Sigmund Bloom, over on the Audible, he talks about this all the time. That teams kind of have their DNA, and the Jets' DNA is a team that it's a really harsh culture to play in, harsh media, harsh fans, and we see it year after year where expectations start to build in the offseason, and then the regular season hits and reality sets in. And I just think that unfortunately, like you said, it starts at the top, and until ownership changes, I think it's just going to continue to be tough for the Jets.
All right, next on here at number 5, I had them ranked at 6. You had them ranked at 4. At number 5, we've got the Las Vegas Raiders. And Dave, we were just out in Las Vegas for the Football Guys Retreat, and boy,
I had a view of Allegiant Stadium from my room. It was beautiful, like just right outside my hotel window. Allegiant Stadium, right there.
yeah, yeah, it's
Great
pretty.
looking stadium. It's big.
Sure.
It's
Yeah, it
big.
is. Not a lot of W's in there, not a lot of fans either. It's the vibes are on the Raiders and just like everything there just feels so bleak. This season was once again it felt like patchwork. It kind of felt like they didn't quite turn the boat in the right direction to keep just using boat metaphors here. They keep Antonio Pierce from interim to full-time head coach. They keep Aiden O'Connell as the quarterback. They bring in Gardner Minshew. They keep Zamir White as the starting running back. They bring in Alexander Madison. It just kind of seemed like everything they did was all about continuity of a bad team and then
Mhm.
bringing in guys that never really have quite been good starters. And I think that just lends more to ownership and this like false commitment to excellence that they've always stated they have for years and just win baby and the whole Al Davis thing. And I don't necessarily know that it's there anymore, but I do think that Tom Brady, who's now part of the ownership group, is really going to have a voice in this and going to want to make those changes and kind of make them Patriots West Coast, so to speak, for the Raiders. And it would not surprise me if this is exactly where Brian Flores gets his next coaching opportunity. It might be a little too similar to Antonio Pierce, a guy who played linebacker, a defensive mind,
Yep.
a tough as nails coach. But the difference here is that we've actually seen Brian Flores have success in the NFL, but then it just kind of crumbled because of whatever was going on behind the scenes. Tom Brady knows Brian Flores, and I think there's a little bit of a difference here where, man, I think that if Flores ever gets a shot again in the NFL, this might be the only opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know if Flores is going to get another shot. And you look at it, the way the team is set up right now, they don't have a quarterback and they're picking sixth this year. So they're probably going to have to draft and develop a quarterback. And I think based on what we saw from Flores during his time in Miami. Of course, I'm a big believer in, extending grace and giving people second
Right.
chances and things of that nature. I don't know if the NFL though is quite as forgiving. And when you see Tua Tagovailoa, who has been, one of the league leaders in yardage over the last couple of years in the post Brian Flores era, and then you look at what he did with Brian Flores, I don't know if a team is going to want to put him in charge of a team who's going to have to draft and develop a quarterback. Um, my favorite for the Raiders job before yesterday afternoon was Deion Sanders. I thought
Mm.
that the way that it would look, with the Raiders picking
Well,
at
he said
six,
he wants that job. He said that he'd be very, very interested in it.
and I think that it's very likely, but I think that there is another opening now that Deion Sanders might be a little bit more likely to sign, and we'll discuss that in just a little bit. Um, I don't know. I like Brian Flores, and I think that he deserves another chance. Like I said, I just don't know if the NFL is there. I've got Joe Brady, who you talked about earlier. I
Okay.
expect him to go to the Raiders. It does seem like they're a team that really likes the offensive side of the football, and they've made big investments at wide receiver and running back, and now they're going to do it this year at quarterback. So I think that we'll try to see them try to juice that offense a little bit, and a creative young mind like Joe Brady can do that. Really, though, I think they had a good coach a couple of years ago, and they just kind of kicked him to the curb. What they had in that interim head coach from Rich Bisaccia, I really liked him, and the team seemed to rally behind him. And then they let him go, brought in Josh McDaniel, and I think they learned from their mistake by letting Bisaccia go, and that's why they turned Antonio Pierce, their interim head coach, into their coach going into the next year. I think they had the right mindset, just with the wrong guy. So as much as I'd love to see them bring Rich Bisaccia back, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we might end up seeing Joe Brady land here.
It's crazy the hit to miss rates on interim head coaches and how often they actually get the jobs later. Like, I will still never emotionally or financially recover from Dan Campbell being the interim head coach of the Miami
Oh,
Dolphins, getting them to win games after being just absolutely awful, and then him finding success elsewhere.
yeah.
I will never
Just
recover
think
from
about
this.
how different things could have been if you guys just stuck with Dan Campbell for a few years.
Shut
Yeah.
up, Dave. Shut up,
Yeah,
Dave. I don't
sorry.
want to do that.
Sorry, man.
I don't want to do that. Also, by the way, the Raiders came out and said that they have no interest in Deion Sanders as a coach, which was interesting because
Really?
that's when I was doing my research. It was one of those things where it was reported the Raiders have said they have zero interest in Deion Sanders as their next head coach, despite him saying that he would be very interested in that job.
Yeah.
So, I
Hmm.
think that kind of leads us to our next team, though. Dave, we got some new news. Dallas Cowboys let go of Mike McCarthy, and we have the Cowboys on our list as the fourth job opening in the rankings here. One, kind of messed up what they did to Mike McCarthy. After all this, if you know you're going to fire the guy and he can't
Yeah.
get interviews for any of these places, and now it's last second, and why wouldn't you have fired him weeks ago? Weeks ago. So I get it. I
Jerry's
have
gonna
them at
Jerry.
4. Yeah, I have them at 4. Dave, you have them at 5, and I totally get that. I totally get that, and I think there's a case for them to be even lower on this list simply because of Jerry Jones and the way he interferes with things and the way that they just treated their current head coach and the way you're locked into a Dak Prescott contract and the injuries and everything there. There's enough that could make you feel a little less confident about it, but in many respects, I still think the Dallas Cowboys can be an attractive team for free agents. I do think it can still be an attractive team for a head coach. And honestly, I think the only coach who can turn this thing around and can save some face with the fans, with Jerry, with players, Deion Sanders, Colorado
Yeah.
head coach. And I know a lot of people are trying to like tie him to literally any other team that might be able to trade up and draft his son, Shadur Sanders. And guys, we rarely see that. We rarely ever, I mean, let alone father son, but we never even see college coaches go and draft their former quarterbacks. And I think Deion's the perfect guy here for Dallas. He's already got that relationship with Jerry. If there's anyone that can handle him, I think it's Deion. If there's anyone that knows how to maneuver within that organization, it's Deion. And if there's anyone that can bring some excitement back to this team that has just become kind of the butt of every single joke, it's Deion.
Yeah, I think it just makes sense just because there's the connection there. Deion Sanders, a Cowboys legend, and I think that much like we talked about with the Jets, they're going to try to hire somebody that's going to get the fan base fired up. Um, and there's a lot of ado made about Dion and Shador being tied together and coming into the league together, and that's why I still think that maybe Las Vegas does it. Maybe the Jets do it, both picking top 7 where Shador could potentially fall to them. It would be a little bit different having Deion come to Dallas where he would have to take on Dak Prescott. They don't really have a way to get out of this unless Jerry Jones is interested in eating 150 million plus in dead cap, and I don't think he's going to do that. But I will say the way that they structured Dak Prescott's salary is kind of smart. They front loaded it pretty heavily where he's going to be, his cap hit next year is close to $90 million. And from there, it falls off pretty dramatically. So it's not like they're, really constrained with Dak's contract. He's a good quarterback and his contract relief gets better and better every single year that he's on that deal. So I don't think that it's a terrible spot. I think the worst thing about playing for the Cowboys is that you do have the interference from Jerry Jones, like you mentioned. And that's why we both have him kind of as a middle of the pack team. But of all of the teams available, yeah, he's on a big contract, but you can argue that Dak Prescott is the best quarterback available for all of these teams that are looking for head coaches. Of course, there's Trevor Lawrence and Caleb Williams and Drake May who have shown promise in their young careers, but Dak Prescott has had the staying power, and he's a veteran that we know can play well.
I'm looking at his contract right now, and the only thing that really even makes sense for them is if they were to do a post June 1st trade. That's where cap space opens up for them. If not, if they do a pre June 1st anything, they're 61 million against the cap or 14 million against the cap for a trade. Post June 1st release is a $14,000 savings, which is, keep them. Really, the only thing that works is a trade. So you'd have to find someone that is willing to trade for Dak Prescott. And I don't know that they find that. So whatever coach comes in, deion, I think needs to be willing to work with Dak. And I kind of look at this more as you need a coach that can recruit. Like, just honestly, I don't think that you need.
People are going to want to play for Deion. Yeah.
Yes, NFL players are going to want to play for Deion. I think the defense is going to try to be full of playmakers. It's gonna be guys that want to be just like Deion and want to go play for him. It could also just be a total S storm. I don't want to say the word here on football, guys, but yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, if you think about it, like Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, those guys playing for Deion, it's not crazy to think that he could unlock them and make them better
And
than
Micah's
they
ready to
already
leave.
are. Yeah.
Micah Parsons is ready to leave. Like, you need guys that can not only recruit new players, but get your current stars to stay. Because how long are you keeping Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb and all these other huge names if you can't even just put a good product or have a good coach on the field?
And we'll get deeper into draft discussion, over the next few months here. But the Cowboys are drafting at 12th. Let's say they do sign Deion. This isn't a clear cut draft by any means. There could be a lot of shuffling at the top of the draft based on how we projected and how it actually falls out. Would it surprise you if Shador were to fall to 12 and then they could kind of take that Packers approach where they've got Dak under contract, but they can take Shador and keep him for a year or two while they kind of figure out what they want to do with Dak? I don't know. Maybe 12 is a little bit steep for him to fall, but there's a lot of teams that don't seem sold on Shador. And if the Cowboys end up with Deion and Shador falls to 12, then we can look at that kind of scenario where Shador could sit on the bench for a couple of years, play behind Dak, and then they kind of have that changing of the guard in 2025 or 2026. Or I guess 12 years ahead now, 2026 or 2027, I should say.
See, I'm going to put that to bed right now. Like, I don't think Shador drops out of the top 3 picks. Like, it's just
really
with how he's talented. He's extremely talented. Would he be the number 1 pick in most drafts? Probably not. Do people enjoy the baggage? Probably not. But this is the same thing we hear every single year. Like, how much were we hearing about Caleb Williams' baggage last year and Jaden Daniels' late breakout? And we start to hear all these like bad things later and later and later. Dude, the Titans are picking at 1. They need a quarterback. Unless someone gives them some sort of crazy king's ransom, this is the only time. They have a head coach that's going into his 2nd year. If he doesn't get a quarterback, he's done. He's absolutely done. So, I think it's Shador Sanders going to the Titans. I would have a hard time seeing him fall out of the top 3 in the NFL draft. All right, speaking of 3, let's go to our 3rd team.
Another
Jacksonville
one we're in agreement on.
Yep. And this is another one. Like, I think there's actually a case for this one to be low as well. It's weird because this is just the best of the bad. Honestly, like that's what it is. There's not a good ownership situation anywhere. And Shad Khan kind of continues that trend of just being one of these meddling owners who this is like a hobby to them, man. It honestly is. And it sucks for fans because fans put their life, like there's always that meme where it's like guys will pick their favorite team when they're 6 years old and just let it ruin their lives for as long as they live. And Fans put so much into these teams, absolutely love them. And then a billionaire comes along and is like, this will be fun. This will be fun. Let's just start hiring random people and picking random players and being part of this process. It's a hobby to them. And I think because of that, I think Shad Khan's probably not going to be looking for a head coach that's a little bit older and a little more grizzled in the NFL. And he's done that. He did the Doug Peterson thing. And I think he's going to want to do the trendy thing, the hip, cool thing. Is I'm not a regular owner. I'm a cool owner. And I'm going to go out and get the offensive mind that everyone's been so impressed with. And I'm going to grab Liam Cohen from the Bucks, another Florida team just down the road. Look at how good the Bucks are. They're making the playoffs. If he can do that with Baker Mayfield, he can do that with Trevor Lawrence. And I would not be surprised if that's where we see him going. We put the Jags at 3. I don't know how good of a landing spot this actually is for any head coach.
Yeah, and I like Liam Cohen a lot, and it was tough for me to keep Liam Cohen out of here, but there's a lot of deserving coaches that are going to be available right now, and
Yep.
unfortunately, just because you deserve a head coaching spot doesn't mean you're going to get one. And I think that Liam Cohen probably does deserve one, but he might have to wait until the next cycle because there just simply aren't enough spots to go around. And there are enough spots to go around, but some of these spots are the Jets and the Raiders and the Cowboys who historically make the wrong decision. And I think Liam Cohen is probably the right decision, but I think that he unfortunately gets the shaft in this cycle. I've got a similar mindset though, where I think they are going to want to invest in an offensive guy, but I think the guy who has done the most as an offensive coordinator this year to secure a spot is Todd Monken. I mean, we saw it
Mm.
basically the entire second half of last season and then all of this season where he has just turned Lamar Jackson into a completely different player. You know, a guy that was never even close to 4,000 yards, now pacing for 4,000 yards per season over the second half of last year, smashed that this year as well, still maintaining the rushing production. I think that that is going to make him one of the bigger names in this cycle that is kind of getting swept under the rug by the media for whatever reason. Todd Monken, we loved what he did at Georgia, and we were really excited about what he was going to do in Baltimore, and everything that we dreamed of has now come to fruition. And of course, they beefed up the offensive line, and they added Derrick Henry, and they added Zay Flowers, and they've done things to make that roster better. But I think a lot of this, the change in play style, the uptick in pass rate, the more explosive plays, I think that is all because they've switched from Roman to Monken. And I think that he is probably going to end up with one of these jobs. And it just makes a lot of sense for a team that has all the offensive pieces with Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne and Brian Thomas Jr. and these young, exciting pieces on offense to bring in a good offensive mind. Liam Cohen makes a lot of sense. Todd Monken also makes a lot of sense. We just have a slight preference in which direction they go, but Liam Cohen or Todd Monken, neither of them would surprise me for Jacksonville.
Yeah. Is Trevor Lawrence good?
I don't know. I mean, he
We're gonna
looks good
find
on
out.
film, but then you start
He
looking at
has
all the numbers
flashes.
and you like can't find any stats that make it sound like he's a good quarterback. He's kind of like the anti Jordan Love, where Jordan Love looks terrible and then his numbers make you think he's a good quarterback. Trevor Lawrence looks good and then his numbers make you think that he's bad.
This is going to be I think it's going to end up being a make or break year for Trevor Lawrence, which is odd considering that they gave him the extension. I don't even
Mhm.
know what kind of flexibility they have, but if they go out, get an offensive mind, which I think that's exactly what they do, whether it's Monken, Cohen, or anyone else, like Cliff Kingsbury's name keeps coming up, and Kellen Moore is another guy that keeps coming up. And it wouldn't surprise me if they go Bobby Slowick, a guy that's in the division. Let's help
Uh,
ourselves and try to hurt the Texans, and take away
I
from
think
CJ
Slowick.
Stroud.
I think Slowick hurt his stock quite a bit this year with the
He
way that run game,
absolutely did.
with the way
He
the pass game fell
absolutely did.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's one of those things that teams think of is how can we help ourselves while hurting an in division rival? And he knows everything about CJ Stroud and can help us defeat him and blah, 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 blah.
I think
Either
the
way,
big thing, though, you talk about the flexibility with the contract. I think when you got an owner like Shad Khan, who is a millionaire or a billionaire, and I don't think he really cares about stuff like that. I mean, you look at it, he might just be willing to eat the dead cap. Like if they decide Trevor Lawrence isn't the guy, they might just eat the dead cap and move on. That's something we haven't seen a lot historically, but we have seen a lot very recently. I mean, I think the first team to kind of do it was the Atlanta Falcons when they just said, "Hey, Matt Ryan's not the guy. He's washed. His shoulders done for. We're just going to eat the 45 million and move on." And then we saw the Broncos do it, where they ate $80 million in dead cap from the Russell Wilson contract. Even after that, we saw the Packers move on, 45 mil in dead cap from Aaron Rodgers. And now the Jets are going to move on and eat dead cap in Aaron Rodgers. And the Falcons might move on again and eat the dead
cap's
cap
not
for
real.
Kirk Cousins. the cap isn't real. And I think that you see a lot of teams are willing to just take their medicine and move on. And I think that Shad Khan is that type of owner where if Trevor Lawrence comes out and has a really bad year, they might just say, you know what, we'll eat the $88 million in dead cap and move on from him. Every fan base is different and every owner is different. Some, owners spend a lot of money in PR and they make it sound like every dollar being spent on personnel is coming directly out of the fan base's pocket. And then you have other owners like Arthur Blank and Shad Khan that don't really care about the money aspect as much and just want to put a good product out on the field.
Yeah, I think we can kind of put all of these teams in the same bucket where ownership's a little wonky, cap situation's not great. Some of these cap situations fine. They have plenty of spending power,
Yeah.
but there are very few teams, and I think the Cowboys and Jags kind of start this trend of teams that actually have a quarterback under center. And then when we get to the top two teams that we're looking at here, it's the teams that have a good young quarterback going into their second year, and I think that's what makes these jobs so attractive. And Dave, I wimped out. I wimped out, and I changed my rankings here because of what you said about the ownership for
I
the
noticed it. I
Chicago
just looked at the
Bears.
spreadsheet and I was like, I thought we had a discrepancy here.
Yeah, I had the Bears at 1, and honestly, what you're saying, not that there's like a whole lot of continuity with the Patriots ownership and what they've done. It's not fair because they've just had Belichick, and then their first coach they get after
And
them, like,
Brady.
you get one season,
Yeah.
and so but at least with the Bears, they have a much longer track record of things not
I
going
just feel like
well.
it almost just feels like, oh, and I'll go back to it. Like Gerard Mayo just feels like the sacrificial lamb. Like they had to put him out there. They had to have a really bad season, and now Vrabel can come in and be the savior.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, number 2, Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
We both have the same offensive coordinator, same person, Ben Johnson, coming in and taking over for the Chicago Bears. And Dave, I want to hear as much as I can from you on this. I just picked this because to me, it's the most attractive job that's left open. He
On
is the
paper.
most sure. He is the most attractive head coaching candidate on paper.
Oh, I
I
thought you
just
were just
like
talking about his looks because he is
I was
devilishly
just gonna
handsome.
say I just like it. I just want to see two sexy people get together. And if we can get the Bears with Caleb Williams and Roma Dunze and this good young core with Ben Johnson, a smart, innovative offensive coordinator, I think he can do some fun things. He knows the division. This is another one of those things where helping ourselves, hurting a rival. But also, I think it's very possible Ben Johnson just says, nope. And he continues to be the offensive coordinator of the Lions. I think he just continues to play with house money every coaching cycle.
Yeah, my big fear, of course, is that the Bears front office is just going to get a little tight when they reach into their wallet, and they're not going to want to give Ben Johnson the money that he's probably going to demand on the market, which sounds like it's going to be $20+ million a year. I don't know if the Bears are going to be willing to pay that. I also, and I hate to say this because I know I'm like on an island here feeling this way, but I'm getting Josh McDaniels vibes from Ben Johnson. This is a guy who,
Mm,
yeah, good offensive mind, and it's impossible to ignore the success that the Lions have found over the last few years, but has
okay.
never really been that leader before. And it's easy for Johnson to focus on the game planning and the playbook and all those sorts of things when you have Dan Campbell being this larger than life personality and leader. And you see Ben Johnson and you hear him in meetings, he kind of fits more into that. I said Josh McDaniel, but also the kind of maybe Jonathan Gannon type of guy, the Mike McDaniel
Shots,
type of guy.
explosives.
Yeah, where he's just very low energy and a very smart guy. I don't want to take that away from him, but that doesn't always translate into being a good head coach. So
I
I
get you.
know, Ben Johnson is the belle of the ball. Everybody's obsessed with Ben Johnson, and understandably so when you watch what the Lions have done. But the Lions have a great head coach. They have arguably the best offensive line in football, whether it be in the run blocking or the passing game. They've got weapons at every single position there. I don't want to say Ben Johnson isn't good at what he does, but I think that his job is very, very easy when he has the leadership and he has the personnel that Detroit has.
Yeah, I think this is the mistake that teams just continue to make is let's pick the smart. I'm watching it right now in Miami with Mike McDaniel. Let's
Right.
pick the smart guy who can be innovative, but honestly, pick that smart guy to be your coordinator.
Right.
I'm very much of the mindset now that we just need leaders. We need leaders that exude vibes. We need leaders that can get players wanting to play for their team. This is the first time in recent memory where I'm actually seeing a team, the Miami Dolphins, say like, we want our coach to yell at us. Like, be upset when
Yeah.
players are showing up late to practice. Like, that's how a team gives up on you. And I'm not saying Ben Johnson is that guy. I don't know him personally. I don't know if he's a soft coach or whatever we want to call it, but there is that thing that's lingering out there, and maybe he ends up just being better as a coordinator than ever as a head coach. And would not be surprised if he stays with the Lions.
So, taking off my analyst hat and putting on my Bears fan hat for a minute here. I think that the Bears, like I said at the top of the show, the blueprint is kind of laid out. We've seen this with a lot of different teams for what makes a good coaching staff, and I think it is having just that leader at head coach. So when I look at some of the other names that are available, that's why I said I wanted Vrabel on the Bears' radar. I really like the idea of Mike Vrabel. Um, I think Brian Flores, I like him in theory, but I think that he needs to put in a little bit more time before another team will trust him. But there's some other, Aaron Glenn, I think would make more sense than Ben Johnson. I think he's a guy that can really get the locker room right, a good leader of men that's going to have those guys playing hard. And again, this is blasphemy. And I know there's going to be people sounding off in the comments that I'm not completely sold on Ben Johnson, but this is also a really, really tough division to play in. We just came back from the football guys retreat in Las Vegas and had a lot of really good conversations about football. And there's so much that goes into the Bears that just doesn't really get talked about. One, the media is brutal here. Like, as soon as a young quarterback has a bad game, every single news outlet in Chicago is talking about how we should bench that guy, how we should move on from that guy. I think about Mitch Trubisky, when he was drafted, everybody in the draft that year in Chicago wanted Deshaun Watson. And when the Bears traded up in the draft, everybody thought that we were getting Deshaun Watson. Instead, they drafted Mitch Trubisky. 2 days after he was drafted, Mitch Trubisky goes to a Bulls game in Chicago in the United Center. They show him on the Jumbotron, and he gets booed by the entire stadium. Like,
It's
that's just the type
crazy.
of city Chicago is. Like, this kid's 21, 22 years old, like living the peak of his life at that moment, getting drafted to be the franchise quarterback for an NFL franchise. And within 48 hours, he's getting booed by his entire city. Like, it is just a tough city to play in. And that doesn't even take into account the weather and the rain and the wind and the snow and all of these things. Yeah, Ben Johnson, he's got a lot of really good playmakers and an amazing offensive line. And they play 15 of their 17 regular season games indoors. Offenses can look really good when you do that, but how's it going to look when it's middle of December and you're playing in Chicago or you're playing in Lambeau? There's just a lot that goes into being a Bears head coach that makes it a really, really tough spot.
I'm excited for you. I hope this works out.
Can you
I
tell that my
genuinely do.
soul is just crushed? Like,
Oh,
there's
heart's
there's
on
no
fire right now.
optimism. There's no
Heart's on fire.
optimism. Yeah.
I want to see. I want that monologue you did to be clipped. I want inspiring music behind it, or just daunting music, whichever the staff thinks is going to work.
All
But
right,
you put your
Jagger.
heart on your sleeve.
Jagger, 35-minute clip. We'll send that over to you after the show.
Get to work. All right. That leads us to our number one team here for the
Yeah.
head coaching spot, and it's already been taken. It's Mike Vrabel. I think this was a great hire for them. Excuse me. I think he probably would have been my top candidate as a head coach. So the
I
best
thought
head
the
coaching
Titans were
candidate.
foolish to follow it, to fire him when they did.
Ridiculous.
Made no sense.
Ridiculous. The Titans are, what's that meme where like it's Eric Andre and he shoots himself and he's like, why would so and so do this? That was the
Yeah.
Titans shooting
Yeah.
themselves, be like, why would we do this? Yeah, it's exactly what they did. You trade AJ Brown, you fire Mike Vrabel, and you just keep
Let Derrick
making
Henry walk, and then you're like, what happened? Why did we get
weird.
mad?
Oh, this is so odd. Yeah. You go to a mayonnaise eating quarterback. Anyways, New England Patriots, they hire Mike Vrabel. So we've already talked enough about how this is a good job. We both like Drake May. There's still tons of pieces that need to be filled here. Like, don't get me wrong. If the Patriots have a 500 record next season, I don't say I'd be shocked. I'd be pleasantly surprised because that'd be a great job by Vrabel. I think the big thing here is going to be whatever offensive coordinator they get to run this offense for not Mitch Trubisky. See, Freudian slip. Drake
He is.
May.
It's a
It's
lot of
North
overlap.
Carolina.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know. The guy that I'm currently thinking of,
But I think
Dave.
this just goes to show. I mean, like you look at like Drake May on paper and Mitch Trubisky on paper in college, and they were such similar quarterbacks. And then we saw Trubisky flame out quickly in Chicago, and now we see here with like a better infrastructure, a better fan base, better ownership, what that can do to develop a quarterback. Because Drake May in his rookie season looked better than Mitch Trubisky ever did, outside of that one magical game against Tampa Bay.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, it just everyone just keeps saying it. Get him some weapons, get him a better offensive system. And the guy I'm looking at, I think Josh McCown, he was Drake May's high school coach, and he's got experience with him. And he's the quarterback's coach right now for the Minnesota Vikings, and he continues to be the guy that gets brought up at random times for head coaching gigs. Remember, he was being talked about as the next Texans head coach.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if he's a guy that gets brought in as the new offensive coordinator, or maybe even you just bring him in to be the QB coach for the Patriots. I'm not sure what kind of pool they'd have.
He's number one on my list for Bears offensive coordinator. What the dream that I had was Vrabel and Josh McCown. That's what I really, really wanted. I think that is very similar to kind of what we've seen Detroit lay out, what works well. So I think Josh McCown would make a lot of sense. I don't know if he's ready for a head coaching gig. Jumping from quarterbacks coach to a head coach is a pretty big leap. I think he needs to put in a year or two as an offensive coordinator. He needs to show that he can call plays, but McCown is definitely going to be a name getting a lot of smoke in the next hiring cycle would be my bet. But yeah, this just on paper makes so much sense. And I don't want to like ruin what will potentially be another show that we'll do down the road. But at some point, we're going to be re-ranking the 2024 rookie class here. And based on what we saw through the rookie years, I think you could make a strong case that Drake May deserves to be ahead of Caleb Williams. I think Jaden Daniels is kind of the QB1 right now, and then you could put Drake May ahead of Caleb Williams. So, in addition to the ownership and the consistency and the culture and all of those things that are in New England, you could even make the argument that they have a better quarterback on the same exact contract as Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. That's why these two organizations were up so high in our listings here for head coaching vacancies. And honestly, if you had to pick one team that you think could make it into the playoffs next year and just turn it around real quick, who is it?
Bear down Chicago Bears.
Of course you did. Of course you did. Yeah, not surprised there, but I'm actually going to agree with you. If Caleb just takes that next step, they've got the weapons. They've
Yeah,
got it there.
I think the Patriots still have quite a few holes on the roster that they need to fill. Really, the roster for the Bears is sound, and they just need a leader that can get the ship going in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. You said ship, right?
Ship.
With a P? Strong
Yes.
P? All right.
Ship.
Cool. Ship. Well, that's going to do it for us. That's a wrap. Finishing up the ship as we continue with the offseason. We're going to have a lot of fun, a lot of these fun offseason topics, and we're going to try to do these and have the videos and audio come out probably every Tuesday throughout the offseason, guys. And we just did our whole planning session in Vegas, and we're going to continue to give you guys more of this content and more as we get closer to the NFL draft and go through free agency. So make sure you're subscribed here. If you're watching, please take a second to like this video, comment down below with your thoughts. And as always, I want to thank you guys for watching and listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.